Ship's midnight, 4 days inbound from the fold limit, one steady gravity on the deck, and the lamps down to the night setting. The dead light ran quiet, holds empty, everyone off shift but the captain. In her cabin, with the door shut, Sable laid out her kit on the fold-down table, in the order she always laid it: the soft cloth, the thermal logger, the little book, a pencil sharpened short. Then the shard from her shirt pocket, lifted out in 2 fingers the way you'd take an egg out from under a hen. It lay on the cloth and was what it was, a thumb of not quite stone, veined in gold, no heavier than it looked. It did nothing. It never did anything. She clipped the logger's lead to it, set her elbows on the table, and waited out the settle in no hurry at all. The number came up cold, colder than the cabin by the margin she could have recited in her sleep, all 4 places of it. She wrote it down anyway, and set the date ahead of it, and the hour. The dates were new, the habit wasn't. Down the passage at a murmur the watch channel opened. Every cabin carried it low at night, so a handoff shift would half hear trouble coming before it reached them. What came down it was Sarn's voice, at his own slow pace, saying every word whole.
"Transport Millie's Bight. This is the salvage hull DeadLight, inbound for Covane," said Sarn. "We read your carrier on the common band. Answer on this channel when you hear me."
The channel stayed open. What filled it was carrier, the flat rush of a powered set holding the door open for a voice. No voice came. Sarn said it again, the same words at the same pace, and the carrier went on rushing at him, empty. The 3rd time Sable had stopped writing. She sat still, pencil off the page, while the shard lay on its cloth and the logger held its number. Down the passage, the open channel went on saying nothing. Morning watch put the whole crew in the galley and the Millie's Bight on the screen above the table, a mark on the plot, a transponder code and a name. The burn ran on underfoot, steady as it had run all night. Sable brought her coffee to the table and read the screen top to bottom twice before she sat. The facts were few, and they would not knit. A midline transport, lit end to end, sitting a quarter day off the through lanes. She was holding her position to the meter, the patient, tireless station keeping that only an autopilot bothers to fly. Transponder honest, name, line, registry, all in order. Carrier up, no distress call on record. Not 5 days ago, not ever. Sarn had hailed her at midnight and at the turn of every hour after, and she had answered him nothing, all night, every hour. The DeadLight herself was running home empty. The tag they had folded out for had come to nothing, and the week was already a loss on Remo's ledger before the Millie's Bight showed on the plot.
"She works a scheduled leg into Colvane and has for 11 years,
said Cricket.
By her own line's timetable she docked 5 days ago. She did not dock 5 days ago. There's no distress call on file, no recovery posted, and no other hull responding. Through traffic has been passing her at range the whole time. She was nobody's problem until she was money. As of this watch, nobody in the galaxy is looking for her except us."
"The rule is first response,"
said Trent, and he had the rest of it ready, because school had made him memorize it, and the trade had never once let him use it.
"First hull to answer and log the response holds salvage rights, hull and cargo, whole, until the owner buys her back or waives her. That's the entire rule. She's intact, she's lit, and midliners run full. That's not rock money. 4 shares each after the cut. 5 if she's carrying half what her class carries."
Nobody argued the arithmetic. Nobody ever did.
5 days and not one soul's come asking after her?
Said Sable into her coffee.
"Not one soul has,"
said Cricket. The table held quiet for a moment on that, and the screen went on showing the mark and the name.
6 hours off the lane, 6 hours back to it,
said Remo.
Half a day, and the reaction mass to match. Against an intact hull, the price is nothing. I will fly it.
"We answer her,"
said Sarn.
lay in the leg, log the response.
Remo went forward with his cup. If the turn could be felt at all, it was less than the coffee showed, and the range to her started falling. Ofa lay along the warm edge of the galley vent, half her legs folded under her and the rest at ease, watching the room with no part of her braced. Coming into Vasey, she had been braced from the first hour, and the whole crew had learned the look of her when the feeling was on her. None of that was on her now. Sable looked her over once and finished her coffee. Trent stayed at the table with the manifest forms blocking out shares that did not exist yet evenly. In a hand his school would have passed. It was the ordinary noise of a job turning good, and nobody minded it.
The response is logged in the guild traffic record,
said Cricket.
As of this minute, the Millie's bite is ours to answer for. So is whatever has kept her from answering.
They came up on her at the end of the break, and when the torch went out, the cabin went to the float. Down stopped being a direction. Sable kept one hand on the plot table's rail and watched the forward glass. The Millie's bite sat in the glass with all her lights on, running lights at her points, green over her lock, and a row of cabin ports lit down the flank, steady, domestic. On the thermal plot, her radiators showed warm exactly where a working ship's heat belongs. She held her heading, and she held her station. There was nothing in the picture to fix. Ofa had come forward for the approach with the rest of them, and settled at the foot of Remo's chair. Somewhere in the last hour, her legs had drawn in neat under her body, all of them. She was watching the glass with the rest of them, and there was none of breakfast's ease in it. Sable had read her easy that morning. She was not easy now.
May I say something, Captain?
Said Ofa. Sarn turned from the glass, which was permission.
That ship is very quiet,
said Ofa.
I don't mean the radio.
Nobody put anything on top of that for a moment. The lit port sat in the glass and went on being lit.
Passive sweep is clean,
said Cricket.
She is warm where a working ship is warm, cold where a working ship is cold, and her power draw has not moved in 5 days. No board I own will say one word against her.
Sarn watched the ports a while longer. Whatever arithmetic he ran it where he ran everything, and none of it reached his face.
We board her,
said Sarn.
Sable, Trent, suits.
Trent was out of his straps before the sentence ended, hungry for it in the old way, though quieter about the hunger than he'd been at 25. Sable unclipped without hurry. She had not volunteered. She never volunteered. She went where the captain's list put her, and the list had put her third. The anchor gun spoke twice across the gap, one bolt forward of the transport's lock and one aft. Each bite came back through the DeadLight's frame as a short, hard tap, and the lines wound up until the two hulls stood off each other, tight, coupled, riding the transport's own perfect station. Remo gave the ship to the lines and kept his hands where they lived.
I hold the DeadLight,
said Remo.
That is the whole of my job until you are back across. I am content with it.
Sable stowed her cup, stopped half a minute at her own cabin, and went down to the suit racks. Ofa stayed at the foot of Remo's chair and watched the three of them go. Across the gap, the Millie's bite burned every light she owned, trim as a ship with somewhere to be. The lock bay sat at the bottom of the ship, and the three of them suited up in the float, boots hooked under the rail while they worked. Sable ran her seals 1 to 5 and turned so Trent could check the 6th. The pumps ticked somewhere below the deck plates. Ofa's shell hung at the end of the rack, a sealed, segmented thing, an accordion sleeve for every run of her legs, a clear blister at the front where her senses were. Nobody said who had sent it down. Ofa had followed them down the rail, and she looked at the shell and did not go to it. Sarn stopped with his helmet in the crook of his arm and looked at her. When he spoke, it was in his working voice, the one he kept for loads and lines where no word could afford 2 meanings.
Are we in danger if we cross?
Said Sarn. Sable had never once heard him ask it plain.
No,
Said Ofa.
whatever it was is finished with her. It was finished before we ever saw her.
Sarn heard the all clear all the way through and added nothing to it.
Your shell is down,
Said Sarn.
For you,
Said Ofa.
I did not say it was a place I am able to be.
He took the refusal the same way he had taken the all clear. He sealed his helmet, and the lock took 3. The cycle ran, the outer door swung, and the hard black stood between the hulls. Sable went hand over hand along the crossing line with her own breathing for company. Trent's lamp ahead of her, Sarn's behind. Voice lived on the link now and nowhere else. Halfway along, a thruster on the transport's flank spat one short white puff, and the Millie's bite held her line. 5 days of that. Small corrections, nobody asking for them.
Green both sides.
Said Trent, on the link, first to the outer door and reading its panel.
Power, pressure, no faults. She'll open on the first ask.
Sable took the last meter of line and set her glove flat against the transport's hull. Through the palm, faint and even, came the tick of machinery keeping house. The outer door opened on the first ask, just as Trent had said it would, and the lock filled to ship pressure before Sable's gauge finished climbing. The inner door undogged under Sarn's left hand. Beyond it, the Millie's bite was lit for a working day. She rode the float like any coasting hull, and they went to Mag's Souls at the inner door. The corridor had a floor again, the kind you ask for step by step, not the kind that pulls, and the plating was warm even through the boots, the ducts breathing warm air down its length. Sable's suit read the atmosphere and put a green number where a green number goes. So did Trent's. So did the panel on the transport's own wall, which had been reading the same thing, unwatched, for 5 days.
The ship reads her air good, and your suits read it good twice over,
Said Sarn.
Helmets come off and ride your belts. If any reading changes, they go back on before questions.
Bareheaded, the air was ordinary. Recycled warmed, a little of the galley in it, a little of hot electronics. Somewhere below the deck, a compressor cycled on, ran its minute, and cycled off. They went inboard to look for her crew. The passage was empty in both directions, and every hatch stood easy, some open, some shut, nothing dogged tight. Hand tools sat charged on their racks. The suit lockers were latched, all of them with the emergency bottles full on their wall clips. Whatever the Millie's bite had needed in her last 5 days, it had not been air, and it had not been tools. The mess was 4 of them. 3 sat at the table in their lap straps, settled the way the float settles people who have stopped holding themselves, arms adrift at their own level, chins down. The cards were still in their hands, fanned, curled into easy fingers, a magnetic deck with the pot netted under an elastic mid-game. 1 card had got loose and sat turning in the air over the table, slow, touching nothing. The 4th was at the end of the table over a meal tray, clipped down, spoon still in its slot, half the lids open. Under the counter the chiller cycled, keeping the other half of his ration cold. Nobody's straps were strained, nobody's chair was pushed back. Their faces were easy. At the second player, Sable went slow, and then slower. Nothing in this room was wrong. Her body understood that before her head caught it up. Once, in a corridor on her own ship, a spare part in her hand, fast cold had crossed her knuckles out of air that had no reason to carry it. Every board green. Nothing moved. The locker plating had fogged and rimmed and cleared, and no alarm anywhere had thought it worth a light. That corridor had felt exactly like this room.
First thing you rule out is pressure,
Said Trent at the environmental panel by the hatch. He said it evenly in order, a man running a checklist he'd been examined on.
Blowout, slow leak, anything. Her cabin pressure is a flat line for 5 days. Not a waiver in it. Nothing patched, nothing taped, every hatch cycling normal.
A pause.
So it isn't pressure.
He moved to the next panel.
Then, it's air. A scrubber stack fouls. The bad numbers walk up on a tired crew slow, and they go down easy and never clock it. Happens. It's in the casualty tables.
He pulled the log twice, once from the stack and once through his own suit.
Scrubbers are green. Twice green. The air in here is better than ours. Power then?
Said Trent.
A bus, transient. Systems drop. Cascade. Life support.
He scrolled the bus log and stopped talking while he read it, and the compressor below the deck cycled on again, ran its minute, and cycled off.
This is the most boring bus log I have ever pulled, and that chiller has not missed a cycle in 5 days.
None of it was argument. Every check agreed with every other check, and he ran the next one anyway. Sable left him the panels and went with Sarn to the crew cabins off the mess. The first had its lamp down and its sleeper zipped to the chin in his sack, tethered reader still lit at the end of its cord, face slack. Easy.
5,
said Sable from the hatch.
and this one's boots are still racked.
Back over the mess table, the loose card was still turning. The panels had given Trent nothing, so he took the case to the crew. He started with the man at the meal tray, and he talked while he worked. Faster now, the checklist running out loud.
Bad air marks a man,
said Trent.
Lips gray, nail beds gray. You claw your collar. You get up and go looking for the leak even half gone. They made us memorize the signs.
He turned the dead man's hand over with 2 fingers, careful of him, and looked at the nails, and set the hand back where the float had carried it.
Pink,
said Trent.
Pink as mine.
He crossed to the med locker by the hatch, sealed inventory tag unbroken.
6 berths and a full locker, and nobody pulled so much as a patch,
said Trent.
Nobody keyed the intercom. Nobody called the line. You take sick over 5 minutes, you tell somebody. Over 5 hours, you tell everybody. There's no call in her log. Not a word.
At the table, the 3 hands of cards sat fanned where they had been dealt. Trent stood over them a long moment.
A hand of cards runs a minute,
said Trent.
Maybe 2.
He went to the bunk cabin last. The tethered reader still glowed at the end of its cord holding its page, and the page had not turned in 5 days. Mid-chapter.
He was reading,
said Trent.
Nobody reads through a casualty. You put the book down. Everyone, everywhere, puts the book down.
He stopped there, in the cabin hatch, and Sable watched him reach for the next rung of it, the one his school kept below every other answer, and find the ladder out.
This isn't equipment,
said Trent. He did not finish it. The ducks went on breathing their warm air down the passage. Below the deck, the compressor started its minute. Sarn stood by the mess hatch with his helmet on his hip and offered the silence nothing. Trent looked at the reader a while longer, and then he racked the checklist pad on his thigh without logging the last line, and Sable understood that the talking was over. All the way from Colvane, the kid had carried an answer for everything. He stood in the hatch, now holding none, and he knew it showed, and he let it.
Her muster is 6 hands,
said Sarn.
We have 5. 1 compartment left. Deck 2 aft the engineer's cabin.
They went aft through the lit ship, and no one talked on the way. Deck 2 aft was one short corridor, lit and warm as the rest of her, 4 hatches to a side. Over the last frame, a work log camera watched the corridor. The guild kind, fitted wherever cargo gets counted for pay. Sarn stayed at the ladder head with the sweep log and sent the 2 of them on. Trent went first. He had not spoken on the ladder, and he did not speak at the hatch. The engineer's cabin was the end of the corridor, and the 6th man was in it. He sat at his desk in a lap strap, boots hooked under the chair rail, a heavy-knuckled man of 50, some in a line coverall gone soft at the elbows. His chin was down. His right hand rested on the desktop, and the pen was still in it. Sable stopped in the hatch and looked before she touched anything, the way she looked at a machine she didn't know. The desk lamp was on. Under it, held flat by a page clip, lay an open logbook. Columns ran down the page, a date, an hour, a figure carried to 4 places, line under line under line, in a small square hand that never crowded itself. The book was thick with use. The first entry sat a year and more back, and the pages had the soft edge that comes from one thumb finding them over and over. The last line had its date, its hour, and half a number. It stopped inside the 3rd digit. The pen had never come back down to finish it. Along the outboard bulkhead ran a workbench, and the bench was the tidiest thing on the ship. A cradle stood at its center, built up from stock and pipe strap, filed smooth everywhere it gripped. Sensor leads came off the bench rail, dressed and tied at every hand's width, nothing crossing, nothing pinched. None of it was bought as a set. Every piece had been argued into its place by somebody who had learned the work alone and checked it twice because no school had ever checked it for him. Sable knew benches. She could have sat down at this one and gone to work. In the cradle sat a cylinder the length of her forearm. Not metal, not stone, a smooth gray somewhere between and veined end to end in fine gold. No port, no seam a tool would admit to. The leads from the bench rail lay against its skin on clean little clips. Trent brought the claim pad up and went through the transport's books, cargo first, then stores, then the engineer's own equipment ledger. He searched it by description and again by dimensions. The pad gave him nothing each way.
She's not on any manifest,
said Trent.
Nothing like her is.
Sable cracked the seal at her wrist and drew her hand out of the glove. She put one bare fingertip to the cylinder's shoulder, high on the curve where you'd check a motor for heat. The cold met her skin and kept coming, steady as well water. She held her finger there while nothing in the cabin moved. It was not the cold of a cold thing warming to a hand. It did not warm to her hand. She took her fingertip back and worked her hand into the glove, and took her time over the wrist seal, and her face by then was in order. She looked at the logbook again. A date, an hour, a number to 4 places in a careful hand, month after month of it, kept in a private book on a man's own time. She knew the shape of that page better than anyone alive. She did not touch the book. She did not touch anything again. Trent lifted the cylinder out of the cradle. He did it without a word. On the old rails he had run since the mess, an unlisted item on a first response hull, and unlisted items right across for the claim. He got it in both arms. It had more mass than its size owned to it, came out of the cradle slow and wanted to keep going, and he checked it and held it. Sable watched the gold veins go by a hand's width from her neck ring. They went back up the corridor with it, past the camera, Trent ahead. Sable came last. She left the lamp burning over the dead man's desk, and the pen where it was in his hand, above the number he never finished. The DeadLight took her boarding party back through the lock, still riding her lines in the float, and the cylinder came with them, slung across Trent's chest in a cargo sleeve. Ofa was at the inner door when it opened. Then she was not.
May I be somewhere else?
Said Ofa, from the passage frame, her front legs already through it. Go, said Sarn. She went aft along the ring passage, low and fast, and wedged in where the frames doubled by the stern gear locker, and stayed there. As she went, a thin, small sound traveled with her own, under the translator, off and on, rendered into nothing. Sable, one glove off and her helmet half stowed, heard it go down the passage until the ducts covered it. They carried the fine to the galley, because the galley table was where claims got weighed, and set it down still sleeved under the table's cargo strap. Trent stood back against the counter and left it alone. Sarn keyed the ship's talk.
Remo. The claim is an intact hull, full holds, and one sealed item on no manifest. Price her for me.
I have been pricing her since you crossed,
said Remo, down the talk from the flight deck, flat as the set that carried him.
A midline hull intact is 2 years of pay. Her holds are booked full. On any other ship, that is the best day of a long career. On this ship, her crew died of nothing, and there is no paper that says why. No yard takes that hull. No broker lists that cargo. No line insures either one. The trade does not touch a dead ship without a cause of death. I ran it 3 ways. 0, 0, and 0.
The talk clicked off. Remo had said what changed behavior, and not a word more. Sable had shipped alongside him a long while now. She had heard him price broken hulls, short cargoes, bad air, worse odds. She had never in all of it heard him lay a 0 against a full hold and leave it there. Neither had anyone else in the galley, and no one touched the number.
Then the only money on her is the report of her,
said Sarn.
We document the Millie's bite for her lines inquiry at the guild's rate, and we leave her whole for whoever comes asking. That is the job now.
He turned to the counter.
Trent, suit up again and take the item back across. Seat it in the cradle it came out of, in the position it came out in, and touch nothing else in that cabin, and come home.
Trent took it off the table without a word. He handled it no differently than he'd handled 1,000 racked loads, the sleeve snugged, the strap run to his chest ring, all of it correct, and none of it narrated. From a man who once narrated everything. Sable stood at the bay port while he went back down the crossing line, his lamp small against the transport's lit flank. She had said nothing when the thing came aboard her ship. She said nothing now watching it leave. Twice was easier than once. By the time the lock cycled him home empty-handed, Ofa had come out of the stern frames. She turned up at the galley hatch, underfoot again, and still now and then at long intervals the small sound came and went under the translator, quieter each time, and nobody asked her about it. On the galley table, where the sleeve had lain, the surface held a patch of cold. Sable put her bare palm flat over it and kept it there until the table was all one temperature again. The report was the whole job now, and the report paid by the hour.
14 certified at the documentation rate,
said Cricket over the galley talk while the crew suited for the crossings.
I have the Millie's Bite's own logs pulling across the coupling flight, environmental power, 5 days of each. I'm cycling her deck cameras into the claim record beside ours. This is the part of the trade that pays whether or not anyone died, which is most of why anyone keeps it.
So they documented her, 2 hulls coupled on their anchor lines, riding the transport's dead steady station, and the crew went back and forth across the gap by the hour to photograph a ship that would answer no other way. Sarn logged the condition of her from the outside. Trent shot her holds. The work was slow and it was paid, and nobody hurried it. Room by room, the photo pass ran the inside of her. Every compartment got the same treatment. The wide frame from the hatch, the close work at each station, the time and the place set into the corner of every shot for the inquiry to read. The mess with its card game, the bunk with its lit reader. Mink's cabin was shot last, the cylinder back in its cradle exactly where it had come from. The lamp still burning over the desk, the pen still in the dead man's hand. The record would match the ship. That was the whole point of a record. Then there was the written part, the condition log, and Sarn split the ship into walks and put a name against each one.
Sable. Deck 2 aft. Log the engineer's rig for the inquiry. What it is, how it sits, what shape it's in. You've the eye for a bench.
She took deck 2 aft, alone, on the captain's word. The corridor camera logged her in, a stamp at the hatch to the second. The same stamp it gave everyone. She left her helmet on its belt and went into Mink's cabin bareheaded, with a light and a condition pad. And the room was hers and no one else's. She wrote it clean and complete, the cradle built from stock and pipe strap, filed at every grip. The leads dressed and tied at a hand's width. The sensor rig, the cylinder in its seat, the desk, the lamp, the logbook under its page clip open where its owner had left off. She measured what wanted measuring and set the numbers down square, and she did not touched the book while the pad was recording, and every word of it was true. When the condition log was closed and stamped, she stood a moment over the desk in the quiet the ducts never quite filled. The logbook lay open under the man's still hand. A year and more of dates and hours and 4-place numbers, none of them crowded, kept on his own time in a private book, the same watch she kept on her own ship in a book that looked near enough its twin. The camera was in the corridor. It was not in the room. She slid the book out from beneath the pen hand, gentle, a finger keeping the loose pages from turning, and folded it once into the breast of her suit liner, under the seal, where a suited hand feels nothing and a camera sees less. The pen settled where the book had been. The lamp went on burning. She picked up her light and her pad and walked out. The corridor camera stamped her exit, lawful to the second, and logged a woman who had gone in to do a job and come out having done it. 2 entries in the record, in and out, and 14 hours going onto the bill. Before the lines came off, with the 2 hulls still coupled and the crew at stations, Sarn said the last of it aloud, slowly and completely for the law.
For the claim record. The sealed item found in the engineer's cabin has been returned to that cabin and seated in the cradle it was found in the position it was found in. The Millie's bite is closed up and left holding her own station, her crew aboard sealed for her line's inquiry. The certified record rides with us for filing at Colvane. Cricket. Close the claim.
Closed, Captain.
Said Cricket.
940 frames. The condition logs and 5 days of her own records. The lightest full hold this ship has ever carried.
The anchor bolts let go their bite, 1 forward, 1 aft, and the lines reeled home. Remo eased the DeadLight off her with a breath of thrust, took his clearance, and swung her for the lane. Then the torch lit, and weight came back to the decks, and everything loose aboard remembered where the floor was. At the first push, Sarn put his hand flat on a frame member and said one low word to his ship that the talk didn't carry. In the aft glass, the Millie's bite got small. Running lights at her points, green over her lock, the row of cabin ports burning steady down her flank, 6 aboard, holding her place in the dark for no one. She was still lit when the range took her. The burn home was a day and a half, and it was quiet. Ofa kept to her place along the galley vent, and at long intervals the thin, small sound came and went under her translator, further apart each watch, never quite done. Nobody asked her about it, and nobody had heard Trent's voice since Deck 2. Ship's midnight, 1 day out from Colvane. 1 steady gravity on the deck, and the lamps down to the night setting. The DeadLight ran quiet. In her cabin, with the door shut, Sable laid out her kit on the fold-down table, in the order she always laid it. The soft cloth, the thermal logger, the little book, the pencil. Then the shard from her shirt pocket in 2 fingers onto the cloth. She clipped the logger's lead to it and let the reading settle while the passage carried the watch channel at a murmur, ordinary traffic, hour marks, and nothing. The number came up where the number always came up, cold, by the same margin, to the same 4 places. She wrote it down and set the date ahead of it, and the hour. Then she brought out the second book, from the pocket where it had ridden since the crossing. She laid it open beside her own, on the same cloth, 2 books on 1 small table. His pages went back a year and more. Hers went back months. His figures sat in their columns to 4 places. So did hers. His hand never crowded itself. Neither did hers. She went down his entries line by line under the night lamp, unhurried. The pencil resting off the page, and where his numbers ran, she followed them, page over page, to the half number where they stopped. She sat with that a moment. The shard lay on its cloth and did what it always did, which was nothing. Then she turned past the last entry in her own book to a clean page and squared it on the table and ruled the page into columns. More columns than her old pages carried. She was a long time getting them right. Then she picked up the pencil and set the date at the top and went on. The last morning of the burn, the galley was on its second pot, and Cricket was putting the claim record in its final order for the registrar at Colvane. Ofa lay along the corner bench, in against the bulkhead. Trent sat at the table with his cup and didn't talk, and it had stopped being remarked on.
The record file's clean,
said Cricket.
The photographs, the condition logs, the 14 certified hours and 5 days of the Millie's Bytes own records. All of it files, except one frame off the deck 2 aft camera, from the night her crew stopped. It didn't fit any field on the form. I have been through the form. There are a great many fields.
For a moment nobody picked that up.
More dead pixels, hun,
said Sable, and made it light, and set her cup down.
Same camera type. Probably,
said Trent. It was the first anyone had heard his voice in a day and a half, and there was nothing under it.
It is not the same camera type,
said Cricket.
Ours is a Halden 40. Theirs were Wexler 9s. Different maker, different sensor, different firmware.
A pause went by, no longer than a breath.
Different failure modes.
Nobody said anything to that. From the corner bench came the thin, small sound under the translator. The same sound she had been making off and on since the crew came back across.
Put it on the screen,
said Sarn. Cricket put it on the screen. The Deck 2 corridor stood in the frame the way they had walked it, lit end to end. Every hatch in its place, the guild stamped square in the corner. Halfway along it was a smear, upright longer than a man is tall, crossed against the run of the corridor, too fast for the shutter to hold. It had no edge that held, no face, nothing on the deck where feet would be. The frame before it held an empty corridor. The frame after it held an empty corridor. Blown up, it was a smear. It proved nothing, and it would not file. Around the table, nobody moved. The crew sat still over their cups, and the only thing moving in the galley was Ofa. The small sound going on unchanged, no worse for the picture than she had been all along, her eyes on the crew and not the screen. The camera outside the engineer's cabin had been fitted to certify cargo hours at the guild's documentation rate. It had photographed the corridor 120 times a second, every second, for 9 years, 30 billion frames of nothing happening kept against the day somebody disputed an invoice. It photographed this once. Nobody asked Cricket to take it down.